Hey, good evening, everyone. And as you can see from the video description, we have Bryant Wolfin, who is running for state rep out of District 145. So we'll get started with that in just a moment. I got to start the recording first, and then we shall proceed with the Freedom Talk.
In the restaurant of life, we're putting freedom back on the menu. It's the Missouri Liberty Report with John Williams, working with grassroots organizations and legislatures to make Missouri the freest state in the nation. Let freedom ring.
All right, folks, and we're back with another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks so much for joining me once again this week. Just a quick reminder, if you're watching this live stream on YouTube or Rumble, and you like what you hear, make sure you give it a like. Make sure you subscribe. That'll help other folks find this show. And hear about some of the good things that are being done here in the state of Missouri. All right, with that being said, I am joined this evening by Bryant Wolfin. He is running for state rep here in the state of Missouri out of District 145. He's a liberty lover. I think you're going to appreciate what he has to say. I think we're going to agree on a lot of things. Bryant's been on the show once before. It's been a few months. And just out of the blue, I thought, well, let's get him back on, see how things are going in the campaign, so on and so forth. So, Mr. Wolfin, good evening to you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Hey, John, it's a pleasure. I appreciate you for inviting me back. I guess it means that I didn't do so terrible last time. And great to be back on the platform.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining me. And so I guess to begin with, for those of maybe who didn't hear the first time you were on, give us a little bit of a background, and then we'll and basically a little bit of background why you're choosing to run for state rep here in 2024, and then we'll get into the topics and issues at hand here.
Yeah, for sure. So basically my background, as you said, my name is Bryant Wolfin. I am first and foremost an extremely lucky father of three. I got some awesome kids, some blessed kids. I'm an extremely blessed husband. My wife is a champion. She does everything for us, and without her, I wouldn't be able to even pursue a political endeavor like this. We are on the younger side of things. We are small business owners, and we got a lot going on. But the passion burns here, so that's why we are going after this endeavor. In regards to other things about me, I am a graduate. I have my business associates my associate in business management, a graduate of Mineral Area College, local community college here. As I said before, my wife and I, we're local business owners. We own a couple convenience stores, so we're in the gas station industry. And I'm a lifelong Missourian. I was born here in our district. And I did move out for a little bit. Moved out when I was 9, but we moved back once my wife and I, we got together. We found this house in St. Genevieve, and we came back to our district, and been here ever since and don't regret a thing. Now we live out in the county, out in the private woods, and that's where we like to stay. Privacy. So in regards to some of my my district, as you said, is the 145th district. It is currently being seated by Rick Francis, who is terming out. So this seat will be open. And because of that, the districts, the way that they kind of realigned this time, it's got Perry County and it's got St. Genevieve County in it. I kind of call them sister counties. We're very much alike. Both have industry. We both have a lot of farm culture, agriculture. And it's in my opinion, the best district in Missouri. So we're going to try our hat throw our hat in the ring here. And I have run once before. I ran back in 2020 against an incumbent. The district was a little bit different back then. The incumbent was Dale Wright, and so we tried to unseat what I would call a not very conservative candidate. However, Dale Wright is still a good person. And as you probably know, a good person doesn't necessarily mean what's great for liberty. So to push the liberty agenda, I was kind of tired of sitting idle and sitting back in the stands and watching. So we thought we'd get involved. And unfortunately, we were we failed that endeavor. But after the redistrict, and actually I consider myself politically retired, but after the redistricting kind of happened the way that it aligned out, it was almost too good to be true for us, because in that race we won St. John County, which is my home county, and then we basically tied in Perry County, which is this additional county in our district now. So once we seen that, we knew it was time to get back involved and time to be a champion for liberty once again. So a little bit about my involvement in the political side of things. I am the treasurer of the St. Genevieve Republican Club. I am also the treasurer of the Republican Central Committee. I am the treasurer of our legislative, the 145th committee. Not that we do anything, but I guess it's a title, right? And I volunteer. I'm a youth coach. My kids are in sports. I was a big sports guy growing up, so I volunteer with a lot of that. I volunteer along with some other nonprofits here and there. And I was also a former St. Genevieve alderman, so I was pushing, when we lived in town, pushing liberty-minded ideals on our city government. Of course, as you would imagine, not the most popular, and didn't get a whole lot done. But I did push for some spending cuts, and was a no on a lot of things. And I know Thomas Massey likes to call himself Mr. No, or I guess Ron Paul back in the day was Mr. No, and on our board of aldermen, that was me. I was Mr. No. So basically that's my background. And then, not to go too long, but why I'm running this time around. Similar to why I ran last time, right? I see a problem in the state of Missouri and Jeff City. A lot of people see that we have this super majority Republican, and they think all is good, right? But unfortunately, as you and I know, and obviously most of your listeners will probably know, but that's not the case here. Every single year, we have an expansion of government. We have more spending. We're getting no tax cuts. And, when we do get quote unquote tax cuts, there are tax hikes that get increased in that same session. So it's extremely frustrating to me, from someone who believes in small government and actually believes in conservative principles and liberty-minded stuff, that what we do at Jeff City with our Republican majority is actually a joke. So that's why I want to get involved, is to hopefully preach these principles. I did watch your show last week with Mr. Lovasco. He's one of the best we got. I know he's if I am elected, he'll only have one more term left, assuming he's reelected. But hopefully, continuing on his him passing on the torch to me, I would love to have that. Everything that he's doing, of course, he's much smarter than me, but I think mindset-wise, we're right there, and there's a lot of things that I can continue to push on. And if he does listen to this, an ongoing thing between him and I in our Facebook messages, is I would be glad to push his brass knuckles legislation on if he doesn't get it through before he terms out. And then, lastly, I just want to be a champion for liberty, man. Even those that score very high on the liberty scorecards, or on your conservative scorecards, your AFP scorecards, whatever, don't have a tendency, I guess, in my opinion, of communicating it greatly. And I feel like that might be something that I could take advantage of. The liberty side of things don't have very many, I guess, prominent figures that are pushing the message, that don't give a good message for liberty. They just always come off smarter than everybody else. Granted, they are, but that when it's trying to persuade someone to our side, someone who doesn't speak real good and sounds like they don't have a high IQ might be that type of person that could get those things through. But all right, I talked long enough. On to you, John.
Well, and you are right. There are some really good, or at least pretty good, representatives and senators out there, and some of them are very good at expressing why they vote a certain way, or why they are pushing for certain legislation or certain pieces of legislation, and then why they're working so hard against other things. But yes, I think that's one area that we can do a better job. And people that are in office, people that are campaigning to run for, it doesn't matter if it's a local election or a state election, or even, Congress or something to that effect, is the messaging has to be a little better. And you don't have to use big, flowery words. You can just, be blunt. I guess I daydream sometimes about running for state rep in my district. And I've talked to people about it just, because I've been mulling it over. And I could go into these, candidate meet and greets or any of these things. And basically I could just go in there, and if I didn't win, but I could get people looking at the current rep or the other candidates and saying, yeah, why aren't you doing, why don't you seem interested in getting rid of per se like the personal property tax, or why did you vote for the gas tax? If that's what I accomplish in a campaign, is getting people riled up to pay attention to their rep more and call his actions into questions more, I think that would be a step in the right direction. Now, if I run in a campaign, of course you run to win, but I think on the other hand, if you can do what Ron Paul did, and that is ignite a fire under people, on the whole in the Fed thing, taxes, the drug war, all these things, just his ability to eloquently speak truth. And, in short bursts, he didn't go on for 20 minutes. He spouted facts, bam, bam. The guy was just like an encyclopedia for liberty. We need more candidates like that. While they're running, they need to call into question why the so-called, like you said earlier, supermajority here in Missouri choose to act like or vote, 40, 50% of the time with the Democrats. Things like that, the gasoline tax, the hesitation to remove personal property tax, cut federal money out of the budget, things like that have to be called into question. If these people realize that their constituents are paying attention and saying, we're watching you, sometimes that gets them to act in a little bit better way than they have been. But I know that's a lot to ask for, because you got most households have both parents working. Between that and their kids in school and all these other functions, it's not the easiest thing to do. But if you'd like to get back to a point where, I don't know, maybe only one parent would have to work or something to that effect, I think that's, it's worthwhile to take the time to learn what's going on around you, who is, enabling this, and then removing their tail ends from office. So, things of that nature. But I don't know. I really like Tony Lavasco. I like Senator Eigel. I really like Senator Moon, because he's about as close to constitutional as you can get. But so I got to ask you, I got to get your take, Bryant, on what transpired in the Senate a few weeks ago with the removal of, they're taking their chairmanships out of the committees and taking their parking spots and all that. I don't know if you ever watch. It's vomit inducing, but I don't know if you ever watched the This Week in Missouri Politics from Scott Fawn. But Scott Fawn has announced that he is going to give Stateswoman of the Year award to Cindy, as I call her, Cindy O'Laughingstock, or Cindy O'Laughlin, the one that was her and Rowden were the ones that did these things, and wanted, had mentioned, she said jokingly or half jokingly, of expelling Eigel from the Senate. What are your thoughts on the behavior? I mean, I know you're running for House, but and that has its own problems and leadership there. But what are your thoughts on what the Senate leadership did and their failure to go ahead and get the IP reform bill to the floor for debate?
All right. I do want to touch on one thing real quick that you said, because about running for state rep, which is something very similar to was one of my goals when I ran last time, was the fact to try to get – look, I had never heard any of our local politicians, not once, I swear to you, not one time, say the word liberty in any speeches from the time I started getting involved, which was from 2016 Like I said, I'm still fairly young, and to the time that I ran, which was in 2020, not once that I heard the word liberty. And then after the fact, there was a Lincoln Days that was held after our primary that I was still invited to go to, and I went to. And sure enough, my opponent said the word liberty in his speech. So now, granted, I don't think it has really persuaded his voting record in any form or fashion, but it certainly got him thinking, I would say, about, why I ran against him and maybe changing his point of view on some things, especially because we did good. Like, we did really good. 41% against an incumbent. We're outspent 2-1. And, yeah, so, I mean, obviously that was one of the goals, and we were able to get that goal done because it obviously worked a little bit anyways. Unfortunately, feet weren't held to the fire, and then the voting record goes back to the way it was, which is what you always see. Now, getting to the Senate issues, I had a feeling something like this would happen. As you know, there's a lot of heads in the Senate running for statewide office, and no one was ever going to get along, nor did I ever expect anything to get done at the state level this year, which is sometimes a good thing, but we really do need to figure out this IP reform. Now, in regards to what Senate leadership did, I think this is an exact testament of what's wrong with Jeff City. The leadership in both portions of the legislature has too much power, and that's the speaker is that way, and the president of the Senate is that way, and obviously the majority floor leader. There's just too much power. They shouldn't. It's not right to be able to take away someone's parking space or be able to take away someone's office equipment that has been threatened. And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy that they've got to those levels. And I commend the Freedom Caucus and for fighting the way they are and not to back down for it. So I'm not really sure what leadership is thinking, if that was going to slow them down. To play devil's advocate, and if I was quote unquote on their side, I would only know that was going to make more of a fuel in the fire. So I don't understand what the reasoning was behind that, because it just doesn't really seem like a good move. But with that being said, as someone from an outsider looking in, and who's typically on the side of the Freedom Caucus and on the side of Mike Moon and them, I think it's kind of a disgrace of what's going on in the Senate. And I don't necessarily agree with what's going on both sides. I think no matter what, I think there's probably a lot of grandstanding for both parties. Granted, as I said, it's politics, right? They're running for office. I'm not so much one that is, I don't know. I guess I'm more of just a private person, and not necessarily a loner, if you will, but kind of, I don't really like the headlines. But I guess when you're running for statewide office, you got to try to make the headlines. So I think the attempt to get media attention from both sides is probably what is driving this even further. But at the same time, I think the overall goal needs to be getting IP reform done. I don't care if we get nothing else done this session. That we have to get done. It's got to be IP reform. So hopefully they can come together on that one.
So let me ask you this. Somebody's in the live stream is asking, let's say you win your election here this year, and next year the Missouri Freedom Caucus said, hey, we'd like you to be a member. Would you join the Missouri Freedom Caucus?
So I don't know if they would want me, and the reason why I say that is because I have a tendency of following along the lines of like Mike Moon or Tony Lavasco, and probably being, too far to the right for that group. Now, with that said, I love just about everybody in there. You got Justin Sparks, he's great. You got Bill Eigels, great. All those guys that are involved, Joe Carter and Monty Boyd and all of them, they're freedom fighters for sure. And I'm right there with them. But with that said, would joining some sort of group like that come with expectations? I'd have to look at that, because I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to be able to owe anybody anything. I want to go in there And if I think a bill I need to vote no on, I'm going to vote no on and not necessarily have to fall in line with caucus. Now, would I be a teammate of theirs? 99.99% of the time, I guarantee it, because they're the same people that I've been following for years. Literally all of them, minus the new ones. But like I said, I think I probably am going to fall along the lines of being too far right for what they want anyways.
Yeah, it's funny because the national side of it, part of that group didn't want to invite Mike Moon. Now the people there in Jeff City said, "Hey, would you want to?" And he said, "No. National didn't want me. I'm not starting this. I'm not starting a fight here." And I thought it still boggles my mind a little bit that you don't ask. Again, the guy who follows the Constitution the closest in upholding his oath to defend and uphold the Constitution, and that's the guy you don't ask to be in there, because typically, what we're told, because a lot of candidates like to talk about the Constitution. Now, as far as following it, I don't know about that, but they do love to spout that word a lot, and you would think that people that are supposedly conservatives would take that oath very seriously, and they would know the Constitution and know what, especially when you're voting on a bill and the title says one thing, but there's 14 other bills laid in there. Well, yeah, I get it. You're trying to get things done, right? You want people are yelling and hollering for something to get done, but then other people in the House or the Senate take and they start shoving their bills inside there. I mean, constitutionally, you're supposed to vote no. And I know that makes like Mike Moon like the black sheep in the Senate a lot of times, because, he's like, constitutionally, I cannot support this bill because it goes against what I swore an oath to. So I understand that. And I'm like you. If the only thing they get done is IP reform this year, I'm fine with that for the most part. I mean, I'd like to see gold and silver get through too, but IP reform, getting that done would, and then government not being able to regulate anything else, spend any more money, raise any taxes. I'd see that as a major win for liberty here in the state of Missouri. But I know that's asking for a lot. Asking government not to go overboard and just pass bills willy-nilly that's probably asking for a little too much. And I should probably just stop putting on my thinking cap for a little bit or something. I don't know. So let me ask you. I think we discussed this the last time you were on here, but I know you discussed the when they raised the age to buy tobacco products from 18 to 21. You weren't a fan of that. I don't blame you. But are there some other things, like, was it COVID or any of these other things that really a certain topic or a certain thing that really pushed you to run the first time and now this time again? Or is it just a whole lot of different things that made you say, I got to jump back in and do this again?
So I think it's mainly just the overall scope of government. Now, COVID was very frustrating. I was there in Jeff City to advocate against the governor shutting down the state. I thought that was absolute overreach. Obviously, the counties were doing things along those lines too, but with the Republican governor, I thought we would have been safe at the state level of not shutting down our government, but yet for 3 or 4 months that happened. Well, it happened. I guess I should have stopped being so naive. So it's mainly just the fact that I'm so sick and tired of government expansion that we have to have people in the House that are I guess pushing these types of principles. Otherwise, nothing's ever going to get done. I hate to keep hitting on the same topics that everybody else hits on, but I mean they're absolutely true. Our income tax is way too high. Property taxes. Why is this even a fight? Like, why is it? It's not about the funding, and this is one of the biggest issues that I have with government in general. Is we can't cut that because where are we going to get the money? That's not the way we should be looking at government funding, and that is not the way that we should be looking at the role of government. It's whether or not it is morally just to take someone's money or it's not. And if the person has no option and is forced to give the government their money for property that they own, then it is certainly unjust, in my opinion, and I'm sure obviously you would agree as well. So, things along those lines. It's just the overall scope of the government that it really got me back into it. And like I said, I consider myself politically retired because campaigning's not fun. So just a heads up, if you do decide to run, which I would help you in any way, shape, or form that I can promise you that. But it sucks, that fundraising. I know we talked about this before the show, but fundraising when you're not a fan of taking money from PACs and you don't have lobbyist money coming in and you're not well connected with Jeff City, the money doesn't flow in, and it's almost impossible to win these races. Now, there are other things that I'm doing to get out there and push myself and get that name recognition out there, but it's a lot of work, and especially on top of being a dad of three, a husband, and having two businesses, it's tough. So, but the passion's there, man. The fire is there. I know we've discussed a lot about Ron Paul and Thomas Massey and having more people along those lines of fighting at our state level. And maybe this is kind of the first step, but we have to try. We're not getting anything done if we're just sitting on the sidelines. And this was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. So it's I'll be real honest. I kind of went off on a tangent there. I don't even know if I answered your question. I apologize if I didn't. That's my apologies.
Hey, no. Hey, listen. I'm the same way. I tell people at work anymore, because the people in my little area that I work in, they're all at least 20 years younger than I am. Sometimes half my age, and sometimes I talk to them about some of these things, and I feel like I'm the get off my lawn guy because I get a little worked up when I'm talking about personal property taxes or a myriad of other topics, whether it's at the national level or the state level. Yeah, I get a little fired up, and then I find myself diverging from the main topic because it leads me to think about something else that really irritates the hell out of me. So we saw what happened out of session with Plocker and all these things, and now Patterson is going to be the new Speaker of the House. I love how they vote on these guys and their position like a year ahead of time. That baffles me as well. I mean, I get it. Who the Speaker of the House is the one that raises the most money for campaigning for the party, what is it, the MRCC? I think that's what it's called, or the Missouri, or is it MHRC? I don't remember. Anyway,
that's the MHRC.
Yeah, so when you get into office, they hand you an envelope and it's like, oh, this is how much money you need to raise for us, and then it's already been settled that if you are one of those people that hits the mark, then you'll get a chair on the committee that you want. Okay, that ticks me off to begin with. It's like, so they don't have to prove themselves to be good to be good stewards of their constituents. They have to prove that they can raise the money that you deem they should raise for you before you get anything. Well, to me, how honest can these committees actually be, or some of the chairs on these committees? How honest can they be when they literally had to buy their seat? That bothers me a little bit. But again, the whole we're going to elect the next Speaker of the House because Plocker's terming out, so we got to get it done now. And my rep told me, or he told a group of us one time, that when that's going on, Jeff City is just absolutely crawling with lobbyists, all over the place, trying to hedge the votes for the guy that's going to identify the most with them. You talk about the Missouri Realtors Association. They don't want IP reform done. Then you got groups like the Farm Bureau that doesn't want to see the elimination of the personal property tax. Now, I thought these people were pro-farmers, especially supposedly pro-family farm. why wouldn't you want to get rid of a burden? Why wouldn't you want to rid a family farmer of a burden of taxation? But yet they fight against it. And I think that's why it's just, it's an inherently corrupt system. And you have to try to find good people in there to either slow it down or stop it. And that's so sad that realtors, a big group of realtors, don't want IP reform, which, again, I question that whole thing. But there's so much stuff that you have to fight against when you're a state rep or a senator. And I just wonder how people, like the Lovascos and some of these other guys, I just wonder how they keep their sanity after being in there for 6-8 years. I mean, how do you not just come home and pull all your hair out and bang your forehead off the wall? I don't understand. But what do you think about, having to raise so much money to get a chair on a committee, or, some of these PACs and some of this stuff, fighting literally against the will of the people, especially on IP reform?
Yeah, so it's the Jeff City model, excuse me. It's the same, or I'm sorry, it's the Washington, D.C. model, excuse me. It's the same thing. So they have to do this on the federal level, and it's crazy that someone that may have the experience and the know-how and be the perfect person to be the chair of that committee not have an opportunity because they didn't raise any money, anything along those sorts. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who would be a better chair at downsizing government than Tony Lovasco. And yes, he may sit on that committee, but he doesn't chair it. And, bringing that up, I'm going to be committing political suicide probably on day one of my tenure if elected, because I plan on going in and proposing a bunch of rules to the House rules that are probably going to get me in trouble. But, it's something that I felt has needed done for a long time. And it's actually funny that the first stream session, I know we keep bringing up Mike Moon here, but the stream of the session on the stream, the first one I've ever watched, was Mike Moon getting up and trying to change some of the House rules all the way back in like 2018, 2019 or something like that. And, that I know that takes a lot of guts and courage. And I know this session we had Mozzie Boyd try to get up there and change a rule, whether it was little or not. And, things along the lines of like the committees actually selecting their chairpersons, the bill sponsors selecting their committees, committee chairs selecting bills that they get to vote on, rather than, the speaker choosing all of these different things. Or, if the speaker wants to remove somebody from their position or from their committee seat or their chairmanship, then, maybe the speaker and the floor leader and the committee chair all have to agree. And, maybe 99 out of times out of 100 they will, but there's always that one. So any way that we could, pull power from the speaker, I think is something that would be a benefit for Missouri. And then also, why not give me an option to be able to select my Speaker of the House? That's something that doesn't make any sense to me, that I pretty much have no say-so on, John Patterson being my Speaker of the House, whether I like it or not. And I don't know, it's a broken system. Look, I'm not very good at raising money, so for anybody, any leadership that's listening to me, it sounds to me like I'm probably not going to be getting any committee chairs, because if I was good at raising money, then I wouldn't be worried about funding for my campaign. So unfortunately, I'm going to be, I guess, in between a rock and a hard place here, because I want to be able to get on the budget committee, and I would love to be able to get on like downsizing government and things along those lines. But if it comes to raising money for the party, and it comes to raising money for, other things that are going to other people, well, that's not why I'm going to Jefferson City. So I hope they don't expect much from me.
And fair enough. I mean, yeah, it's. I'll be honest, man. I want to see the people of Missouri fight for what's right. I want them to understand what government's role is supposed to be. I want them to understand what their rep or senator is supposed to be doing. And I want the people to hold their elected officials accountable. But at the same time, I have to admit, there's a pessimistic side of me that says that, again, the way House and Senate leadership is acting, it's hard for me to be optimistic. Now, that changed a little bit when I went to the rally January 29th and saw 400 to 500 people crammed in hallways and saying, "Hey, let's get this crap done. Let's get IP reform through committee onto the back onto the floor for debate." And I know they're going to have many more rallies, and they're going to have to continue to put a boatload of pressure on Rowden and Laughingstock. But it's still hard for me to be optimistic. I look around the political landscape around the country, and it's just like, good grief. When are people, not all people, but when are a lot of these people going to pull their heads out of the rumps? They vote for a party over principle. Well, that's never done anybody really any good at the end of the day. Voting for party over principle, or a representative doing the same thing, voting for what some group wants them to do over what the people want them to do. At the end of the day, it never turns out well for us. I mean, sure, it might line their pockets with more campaign donations, but at the end of the day, they've screwed all their constituents over. And clearly, it doesn't faze some of them. But, I mean, I want to continue to talk about this. I want to continue to bring light to these things. But, man, being optimistic about this stuff, again, when you have, this is just a cutesy little thing that I do. With Scott Fawn literally fawning all over every rhino, and you say Caleb Rowden is a great man, or Cindy O'Loughlin is Stateswoman of the Year. And I'm thinking, and he's supposed to be some hillbilly conservative, and it's like, dude, I mean, if you're actually a conservative, I think you would be appalled at the way things are being done in that building. But, I know I'm asking too much. I'm being too nitpicky, I guess. I should lower my standards or something to that effect. But let me ask you this, Bryant. What are some things that you would personally, let's say you're elected, what are some things that you would like to work on? What are some ideas besides new rules for the House, which none of us in the live stream here are going to argue if we could change the rules? But what are some other things legislatively that you would like to work on and build up, I don't know, a group of people to help, regain some liberties, maybe keep more of our money? What are some things you'd like to do?
Well, the number one thing that I think that I could probably expertise in and really make change would be on like spending cuts on the budget. I did that at our local level when I was an alderman. As I said a little bit earlier, I alluded to anyways, I think I presented like less than 1% of our budget, or maybe it was like 2% of cuts in our budget, and we got less than 1% of them done. But, spending cuts is spending cuts, and then I considered it a win in the end. It's actually funny because I still voted no on that budget because there was so much wasted spending. But that's something that I would love to work towards at the state level, and that's probably my main priority, because taxes are my main thing that eats at me is the taxation that we have at the state. We're high on everything. We're 21st in income tax. We're 27th in property tax, I think, and 38th in like sales tax or something. So we're always at the halfway mark, or on the lower half of the states when it comes to taxation. And I'm talking like the bad side of things. We're not in the, that you got to look at that as bad. Those are bad numbers, especially when we are a majority Republican state, but yet we can't do anything about it. Our platform states that we are in favor of spending cuts and tax cuts, but yet we don't push towards those. Other legislation priorities, as I said, anything that has to do with cutting regulation or in the government, sign me up. I would love to be able to revert our state laws. Of course, I'm a C-store guy, convenience store guy, so reverting our laws back to rather than 21 reverting back to 18 to be able to buy tobacco. And if you're able to buy a firearm or serve in our military, you should be able to buy your tobacco. So whether or not that goes against federal guidelines or federal statutes, I don't care. If we want state sovereignty and we want to stop letting the government trample all over our state rights of being able to legislate our people, then we need to start pushing back. Things along something, as I said earlier, I think Tony Lavasco's brass knuckles bill in regards to like our Second Amendment rights, I think that's a solid bill that should be a no-brainer and really small in the grand scheme of things, but yet it can never get done, probably because there's no money behind it, of course, but that's something that I would love to push. And yeah, man, I mean, anything that advances our liberties or gets the government off our backs. There's not a whole lot of specific legislation that I have off the top of my head because, as I said before, the spending cuts and the budget is my number one priority going to Jeff City. Because until we start cutting our spending and cutting our budget, we're never going to see tax decreases. We're never going to see property tax cuts, income tax cuts, unless we start there. And to me, that's where I think our liberties are trampled on the most. So that's kind of why that's my priority going in. Plus, it's my expertise. I'm a finance guy. I mean, I run my own run my own business, but I have a special side hobby for financing.
Well, and you're exactly right. I mean, anytime government can take anything from you, especially when they're taking part of the fruits of your labor, if you will, I mean, your liberties automatically go out the door. If it's the same way as somebody I know people don't like it when when you relate to taxation this way, but same way me walking out of the house and a guy pulls up and holds, sticks me up and says, even if he says, "Hey, you got to give me 25% of what's in your wallet," it's essentially the same thing. They have no right to do that, and the government doesn't either. I don't care what their excuse is. But yeah, as soon as a governmental body can say, you are required to give us this much money of your paycheck, you take a whole bunch of your liberties and throw it out the window. And I know it bothers people when you say taxation is theft. But if someone takes money from you and puts it in someone else's pocket, which even in this state, agriculture and some of these other, groups get tax credits or whatever, or they get subsidies, it's still theft. To me, it would not be theft if every week the state of Missouri said, okay, we're going to take this money and we're going to give it to this group and this group and this group and all these things. Are you okay with that? And I say no, and they're like, oh, okay, keep your money. But that's not the way it is. They take it, and then they give it out, and they spend it. And they don't spend it very well. And so it's annoying as all get out. And I know it's really hard to people don't like it when you talk that way, but I don't know how else to be so blunt about taxation. I mean, I'll ask you, Brian, if you were going to Gary says then you give him 25% of the rounds in your magazine. I mean, that's an acceptable compromise. Let's say somebody comes up to you and they ask you what your problem is with all the taxes that we have to pay out. How would you word it to that person?
Well, it's my property, and I should be able to do with that as I want. And look, the government has a monopoly on force, right? There's no one that can come up to me and legally force money or force me to give them my property or my money or anything along those lines, with an exception of the government. The government is the only entity that can do that. Facebook can't do that. YouTube can't do that. Netflix can't do that. Do they get some of my money? Yes. Whether do I like it going to their politics? I do not. But the downside of I guess that's the market. We make those sacrifices sometimes. But the government, there is no sacrifice. The sacrifice would be if I don't pay it, I go to jail. Or if I don't pay it, I lose my property. And so I don't own my property if they have a monopoly on the force to be able to take it. So there's no doubt that taxation is best if it's not voluntarily given. And so that's why, like, a consumption tax or a sales tax, even though I'm not super fond of, because of how high it would be, it's just more of a just tax compared to your property taxes or your estate taxes or anything along those lines. And if they can, at least you could choose or try your best to live off the grid and not have to retail, go to retailers and buy anything to pay the sales tax. There's at least a way out of it. Some sort of voluntary choice to be able to pay that tax. Whereas in regards to your property, you obviously don't, or they come and take your stuff. So it's pretty simple to me. I mean, I feel like it should be a no-brainer, but I will admit, when I go to some of these forums over like bond issues or over sales tax increases, and you hear a politician say, well, it's just, $50 a year. What, you can't afford $50 a year to do such and such? That's the wrong way to look at it, unfortunately, at least in my opinion. And the downside is most people have a tendency of falling for that because they're like, oh yeah, you know what, $50 ain't so bad. So for a water park, that's a local issue for us. We had a sales tax increase for a water park, but the thing about it is we gotta be teaching people that taxes, theft, whether it sounds crazy or not, it's not crazy. It is the reality of things, because the government does have a monopoly on force, and they will take your stuff if you don't pay it.
Yeah, we went through a water park thing here. I mean, we literally just moved into town, and then within 3 months, we get this little flyer. We ordered some pizza from Domino's, and attached to the top of it is, oh, look, a water park. And I'm thinking, no. And there was a lot of shenanigans there, because they told everybody, oh, it's only going to go up, what was it, $30-something a year on average. But then you come to find out, someone called the courthouse and said, how many personal property tax bills go to Owensville? And then she did the math, and it was going to be $100 and something a year. And they threw out a lot of these really feel-good statements, but then they left some important details out, and which after the meetings, when approached, they would admit, yeah, we left that out. So they were just flat out lying constantly. And now we have a school bond issue that we're fighting here in Owensville. And last year or the year before? It was last year. I can't remember. Last year, they wanted to pass it, $15.5 million, and I mean, it lost by like 8-10 votes. They wanted to add this performing arts center and do all this stuff, and the people said no. We had meetings, educated the public. Well, now they're turning around. They're doing the same thing. It's gone up by $1 million, but funny enough, they've left the words. I have a drawing that I'll be showing to the guests later when we're done speaking. And oddly enough, the words Performing Arts Center are no longer on there. It's just an auditorium. So they're changing the wording now, because I think Performing Arts Center didn't go over with people very much. And it's also a storm shelter, which I have to look into this. They may not be lying, because it is FEMA and it's federal government. But they're saying any new additions or new schools built, FEMA requires a storm shelter. And I'm thinking, well, that it wouldn't surprise me. But this is the thing, Bryant, and this is what irritates me. Because on the technical side, it is factual, because it is a no sales tax increase school bond. So the levy would stay the same. But guess what happened? The last meeting they had here in town locally, Patrick Hall and his wife Retha kind of put on and went through the issues with this bond. They keep saying, "Well, you don't care about the kids." And my response to that anymore is, if I hear somebody say that to me, my response to them is going to be, okay, well, then I guess you don't care about the low-income families, people on fixed incomes that could really use a tax break right now. I guess you don't care about them. To me, this is the only way to fight this, because you could say to your blue in the face, I care, I want the kids to be educated over entertainment. That's what my choice. If I send my kids to public school, I'd much rather them be educated, even though the curriculum's a little screwy. If we were educating the children properly, I would choose that over paying for all this entertainment, because they want to re-turf the field and put new lights up to give our kids a competitive edge. I'm sorry, I don't send my kids to school to get a competitive edge. Now, some parents, some kids do a lot of sports. I don't have a problem with that. It's when you put that over education, I start getting a little crabby. So, yeah, I know there's a bill on the Senate side. I believe it's Sierra Poi has a bill that says, hey, when you're going to do a school bond issue, that language has to be clear and concise, not this vague stuff. What do you think about a bill like that, to where, if you're gonna continue the tax burden on a school district and the people therein, would you agree that you need to be very descriptive and not be deceptive in the language on the ballot?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that goes for any tax issue. So we literally just had the same thing about 2 years ago, or maybe even, I think it was probably 2 years ago, to where our bond was sunsetting and getting paid off. And of course, what government does is they never give back the money, nor do they plan on giving their constituents tax breaks. So, we dealt with the same issue. Our main thing that was brought up was an expansion of the pre-K program for this public school locally, and a few other issues, some non-essential, some probably on the more essential side of things. But I guess no one ever brought up the question of, did they actually still have this? Did they have the money to already pay for these things anyways? Or did they absolutely have to have the bond issue? Now, I would argue, I was hard no on it, of course, because similar to what you're saying, like my grandparents, they're on a fixed income. The sales tax decrease would have been great, or whatever tax was tied onto this. It would have been great for them. And so and then the moral of the story is, when it came down to it, the number one issue that was pushed for that pre-K program was, and it was not advertised, was the fact that the brand new district administrative building was going to be attached to this pre-K program building. So now they're building this brand new building for the pre-K program. They're also building a brand new office for the administration building. So that was not advertised, like I said. And that's frustrating when you see that. And so, by the way, I don't mean to go off on a turn here, but the gas tax, for instance, the gas tax was mainly seen for like I-70, or like the representative that pushed the bill, Becky Ruth. She was like, oh, all these cool things are going to happen I-55 through Jefferson County, and this and that and this and that, which we're not seeing any of right now. But I'll tell you what we are seeing is MoDOT purchased a brand new headquarter building and is going to have to remodel everything. So, you keep seeing these tax issues that get passed. Now, obviously, this gas tax was through the state legislature, and local issues are through the ballot, but the vagueness of the wording is always confusing. And a lot of people vote yes or no, maybe meaning one way or the other, but they don't know because they don't understand the language. So absolutely, I would support a bill. I'm not really sure exactly how that would be regulated. I'd have to look at the bill, but generally, I would absolutely support a bill that would streamline the descriptions of these tax increases. Oh, also, by the way, it was also stated that in our race that this was not a sales tax or a tax increase. It was a no tax increase issue or whatever you said. That's exactly what was advertised on ours as well. Of course, I was on Facebook saying the opposite, but it still went through.
Yeah, believe it's one of those topics that gets you all kinds of fired up. All right, for those of you in the KEYK audience, thank you so much for joining me this week for another episode of the Missouri Liberty Report. Again, you can come on to YouTube or Rumble or look for Missouri Liberty Report Plus if you'd like to hear the extended version of this show and hear more of the conversations that I have with the guests that come on to join me, or some of the topics that I cover after the hour that I spend on your radio station. So I hope that you all will do that and catch the end of these shows, because sometimes I go on for another hour just flapping my gums, or my guests and I spend another half an hour talking about different topics. So I'd love it if you come on and subscribe and hear what you're not hearing on the radio side of things. Thanks, everyone, and we'll talk to you all next week. All right. Yeah, I was sitting here while you were talking trying to find out if FEMA requires new school buildings to have storm shelters, but I'm not seeing this requirement. I'm not seeing this regulation. I'm just saying that if you build one, you have to, have this thing.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were. I mean, it's just like any construction project ever that the government tries to force, mainly up in like the city areas where they force certain things. Actually, they just passed a bill at the House that requires, this isn't along the same lines of like the school and the shelter, but there's apparently requirements in the city that require anybody that's building a new facility that has a parking lot over a certain amount of cars has to put in a certain amount of electric charging stations, and they're forced to do that, which is just crazy to me that even a local government entity can force someone to have to install electric chargers or anything for that matter, all for the sake of the convenience, I guess, of the area. And unfortunately, I don't really think that's for some bureaucracy or bureaucrat to decide. I feel like the person that owns that building and owns that lot should probably have that say so, and whether or not they deem it fit for electric charging stations or along those lines. Now, with the public entity, it's harder. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's right. I don't think that FEMA should be forcing schools to build shelters. Quite frankly, I'm not even sure that I'm okay with FEMA forcing public buildings to be handicap accessible. I mean, I obviously see the argument behind it, but what I'm getting at is that, they're dealing with taxpayer dollars. Our local city hall is getting a remodel that is probably spending a 25 to 30% more becoming compliant with federal regulations, which is just charging the taxpayers more money. They're spending so much more money on all these remodels, and that any type of remodel, they have to go back and they're forced to change these things due to federal guidelines, which just further burdens the taxpayer. And I'm not okay with that personally.
Yeah, it looks like because of the International Building Codes. Let me say educational. I just found it. Let's see. Educational requirements with an occupant load of 50 people or more are also required to have a storm shelter. The IBC exempts Group E daycare facilities and Group E occupancies that are accessory to places of religious worship from these requirements. So, okay. Yeah, and here's the thing. I don't want this school bond to go through, but, having things like that, who's paying that? The taxpayers are paying. You're forcing them to have a storm shelter. Now, here's the other screwy thing, Bryant. The newish middle school and newish elementary school, neither one of those have a storm shelter. But you're going to make the high school have a storm shelter because they're putting an addition on. What,
Yep.
what, if there's a tornado goes right through there, what about the kids? Because you're not going to fit all the kids from the elementary, middle school into that high school storm shelter. So what do you do with the kids in the other two buildings? That
If it was anything like my high school, they're not even attached.
Oh, no,
So,
they're not. They're all separated. I mean, there's a decent distance between those buildings, especially the elementary school. The middle school is closer to the high school than the elementary school is. And so, again, it's one of those, these, the international building codes. Why don't they just call it inflationary building codes? Because the more codes you stick in this thick freaking book to so you adhere to them because the states require it, it just causes all the construction costs to skyrocket. They ought to just call it the inflationary building codes, at least have some honesty within the whole damn thing, because that's, it's plain as, the nose on your face. Anytime government sticks their hand into something and requires something of you, it automatically raises the cost, just like licensure. If I wanted to do a job and I wanted to buy specific things to do a certain type of or pursue a certain type of career, and I didn't have a license and I went out and bought those items, I would just about guarantee that I would get them cheaper than the guy that had to go through all the fiery hoops and get his license to buy the same materials, because when you've regulated it down to only licensed people can do this job, then, yeah, of course, the owner takes up that cost, but he's not going to eat that. So the rest of the customers eat that cost. I have to ask you, Brian, I don't remember if we talked about this last time. What is your opinion on licensure? Or just licenses in order to be able to operate a business or to operate specific types, anything from pest control to have to spend $12,000 to be able to cut hair. What are your thoughts on some of those what I call stupid rules?
Yeah, I do believe we hit up on this just a little bit last time, and I am not in favor of any kind of licensing whatsoever. To me, free market guy. I don't rely on the government to tell me who I can and can't buy things from, and whether I want to have my pest control guy come in, whether he's licensed or not, I really don't care, as long as he's using the proper stuff and it's working. And then what does it matter? Or if I'm going to my local barbershop or Great Clips and my person isn't licensed, well, once again, or I don't even care if they went to school. I really could care less. I got my haircut cut from my grandma for many years, and guess what? She did just fine. So yeah, I don't think she went to school for that, by the way. So I can't really see any justification behind telling people that they need to be licensed for many things. Once again, that's what the free market is for. I should be able to make that decision. I could really care less if my family pediatrician is licensed in any form or fashion. If they're correct in what they tell me, then and they know what they're doing, then I believe I will go back. Whereas if they don't, maybe I will go to the person that has a license that was privately, I guess received. They went through. I'm not opposed to there being processes for there being licenses, as I guess someone advertising that they are there, but I don't think it should be government mandated. So it kind of goes back to the protectionism type of thing, of where I'm not in favor of the government protecting me from my own decisions. I'll make those decisions on my own. And if I decide to go through someone who has their license in a certain field, but pay more money for it, then great, I go there. But if I want to go to someone that doesn't have their license and is much cheaper, of course I'm tight, so that's probably where I'm going every time. But assuming that they do a good job too, then that's where I'm going to go. That's for my decision and your decision, and not some bureaucrat in Jeff City or DC to tell me who I can buy from and who I can't.
Yeah, because if you're anywhere close to being somewhat of an intelligent business owner, the last thing you want to do is do horrible work and horrible service, because at some point you're going to go out of business, not because the government puts you out of business, but you're not going to get any more business. The smart thing to do is make your customers happy and do it as, cost effectively as you can to gain customers. I mean, that's just common sense. You don't want to tick off every single person around you because your competition's getting all the business. It bothers me that people look at it as like, if you don't have a license, then you must suck at it. It's the same way. I mean, look at our food, right? The FDA says, well, you can have so many, insects and so much peanut butter. They're all licensed, but they're still allowed to have so many mouse droppings or insect parts per whatever volume. So your food is still not clean and perfect. And that's a regulated, licensed, food manufacturer. Okay, so what's the difference if they're making peanut butter and they're allowed so much per volume, and I'm just making my own peanut butter at home and I try to sell it, and then, the health department and everybody wants to come in and bust my huevos about it? There's literally no difference. Yeah, like Voodoo Queen says, you can't sell raw milk.
Yep.
A farmer, especially a farmer, because, farming is a dying industry. Family farms are a dying thing. The last thing those people want to do is make a bunch of people sick and have to be fined civilly or taken to court or whatever because they got people sick with their product. I mean, I know you can buy it at some health food stores, but here's the caveat. The bottle is marked for animal use only. And that's how, and then some farmers will sell it to you. But I know there's a health food store within a half an hour of me. They get some in, but the bottle is labeled for animal use only, and that covers their butts. And everybody and their brother knows people are drinking that milk. But we had someone here in town who was selling local honey. I mean, they had, all kinds of beehives and everything, but their labels weren't right. And this new health department guy came in and shut them down, took all their stuff and said, your labels aren't right, you're done. And I'm thinking, okay, so it's the labels that's going to make the product bad? So, and they were, apparently it was very good honey. But the health department guy's like, nope, you're done. Shut them down, shut their booth down, said, your labels doesn't have all the, I don't know, I guess an ingredient list or the date it was bottled or whatever. And yeah, he just shut the whole thing down. And that kind of stuff to me, listen, I'm being nitpicky. We always like to talk about how we're so free. But how free are you really when you're just trying to sell honey or raw milk to someone and some bureaucrat or some jackbooted thug steps in and says, no, you didn't have permission from us first before you did that? Well, that's not a very free society when you really think about it, is it, Bryant?
Not at all. I've been saying that for many years. And as I said, we're in an agriculture district here, so we have a lot of local farmers that sell eggs and beef, and I'm sure would love to sell raw milk. And I've actually been an advocate for being able to sell raw milk in most retailers because I would love to sell them in my stores. We have local farmers in our area right at our St. Mary's store that would love to bring it in our store for sure, and I can promise you that. So in regards, I always found it real frustrating, like in regards to beef, we actually have some friends that sell beef, and they have to be quite a bit more expensive because of the hoops that they have to jump through and the guidelines that they have to make sure that they're getting their stuff ran through a proper facility that is FDA approved and this and that, and it has to be the right certain amount of Angus beef or whatever the regulations are. And, obviously they have to sell their stuff at a much higher price. So I don't understand what the problem is of why, like, if I buy my meat from this source that may not be FDA regulated or may not be regulated at all. Look, if I get sick, I'm just not going to go back to them. So why, I don't see a justification in any instance that a bureaucrat can tell me better than what the market can tell me or what myself can tell me when it comes to buying things. And I I don't, as you said, we're not actually free. We have this image of freedom, this dream of freedom that we think we live free, but in reality, everything is regulated. Things would be made way cheaper. Think about cars. Like if cars weren't as heavily regulated as they are, how much more money we would be saving on vehicles over the years. And that just goes for any industry. Every single food item that we have has some sort of inspector that has to come into that facility. And these organizations or these entities have to jump through all these hoops, which is obviously increasing costs. They have paperwork and reports, which leads to more staff and more issues and things along those lines, that they're just paying more money, and it's just making everything more expensive. So it's frustrating. I had actually had a conversation, I don't know, probably a few years back with someone locally here about how I felt, this is actually during COVID, how I felt that we don't need a health department in general. I'm not saying that places can't be inspected, but that if in an ideal world that it wasn't a bureaucrat doing these things, that it would be a private industry or a private inspector, that like I would be proud to maybe have this badge of like, hey, I passed this inspection from this private company that it's reputable company A that inspects food facilities, rather than a bureaucrat that comes in and is only incentive is to try to find something wrong, whether or not we're wrong or not. So, or whether we fail or not. And so it's, to me, I don't see a justification of why we have bureaucrats do these types of things when we have a perfectly good private free market, or at least we should be utilizing, but unfortunately we don't.
No, you're 100% correct in my book. Privatizing, I'd be for privatizing police forces. If you can work that out, privatize the schools, privatize police departments, privatize, restaurant inspections or whatever, health inspections. Sign me up if they can figure out a way to do it. And at the end of the day, what's going to happen is a lot more people in industry are going to move to that area because they know they don't have some arrogant fool who wants to name, or he's having a bad day, so he decides to nitpick that day and write him up for stuff that generally he wouldn't write him up for, and become a thorn in your side and cost you money and maybe shut you down until you get said something fixed that at the end of the day doesn't cause a health concern for the customers. That's I would love to see more privatizing in a lot of these areas. So somebody says, would you support a food freedom bill? I'm supposing you would, but I'll let you speak for that. I don't want to speak for you, Bryant. Would you support a food freedom bill?
Oh, 100%. Like the Prime Act at the federal level? I can't remember the specifics behind it, but that's absolutely something that I would support. Anything that's going to get the regulations out or the government out of the way of these farmers, or basically get rid of the middleman between the farmer and the consumer. I have so many friends around here that I could, and of course, we could probably buy already from the quote unquote black market. It makes it sound a lot worse than it is. But if we want to buy it right and go through the proper channels without them getting in trouble, then, we have to buy increased price food items, and the government is at fault for that. So once again, there's no justification behind in my opinion. There's just not. There's no justification behind a bureaucrat being able to tell me what I can and can't buy, and that is most important when it comes to my food.
Yeah, and therein lies the hypocrisy too, because we have people in government who love to complain about these big business owners and everything else, yet they'll institute all kinds of regulations that in the end the only people left standing are the big industry, and they wipe all their competition out. It's so hypocritical, and people fall for this stinking thinking a lot. We're like, oh, these greedy business owners, we must regulate them more, and they don't understand that those guys are coming in and helping write the regulations to say, oh, at the end of the day, I'm the last man standing. And there's people in both parties that are guilty of doing that at the federal level, and sometimes even, well, a lot of times at the state level too. And yeah, I would love to see something that says, hey, if a local farmer wants to sell his, meat directly to a grocery store or a meat shop or whatever, a butcher shop, whatever, or directly to a consumer, then the risk falls on the consumer. And, God, Brian, can you imagine how much cheaper that meat would be if it didn't have to go to one of these big processing plants and go through all these things and it could be sold direct? How much cheaper, like a pound of hamburger or some steaks or even pork or whatever, how much cheaper that would be if we didn't have to go through these central planners just to go, pick meat up from a store that, I'm sorry, some stores, it doesn't even look like meat in the packaging.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, how much? I can't, obviously you can't put a number on it, but you're exactly right. And so, like here in the United States, obviously we really don't have, like, there are in some areas where there's like rent control and some price controls, but for the most part, there's not a whole lot of price control here in America. So they quote unquote call us a free market, but in reality, you and I both know we're not really, because there's so much government protectionism around every single industry that we're forced to pay higher prices because of it. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess we got to get people that are willing to fight, and we got to get leadership that are willing to push bills like this. I don't understand why this isn't something here in Missouri that we aren't pushing a little bit more. So I actually grew up, not my house, but I call it my second home, because it was my aunt's house and she was my second mom, where we grew up to one of the largest egg distributors in Missouri. And I literally used to go over there and hand pick their eggs from their chickens and basically take them to their little cooling warehouse situation. And it was a mom and pop organization. And, they got just this little farmhouse up on the hill and, 5-6 different chicken houses and stuff. And they've had to upgrade all of their facilities because of the government guidelines that have been slammed down their necks. And, they've been able to keep up with it. But at the same time, once again, it goes back to the cost of their eggs, which got really high over the past few years. So, and of course, why was that? Because of the government. So it's a frustrating thing, man. And the only way that we could really turn it around is to get legislators in there that are willing to pass bills. And I don't understand why food freedom isn't more of a thing here in Missouri. I understand the FDA has a real big stronghold on food, but as once again with state sovereignty, I don't understand why we're not really fighting against the government to try to pull back some of these regulations, whether it's kind of like a SEPA type bill only for food or agriculture. I don't understand why we can't do anything along those lines.
Yeah, one of the guys in the Missouri Freedom Initiative, and one of the guys that I always enjoy talking to so much, Grant. He had a really good suggestion a while back. We need a nullification caucus in Missouri. In the Capitol building, we need a nullification caucus, and their focus is to nullify unconstitutional or immoral federal laws, and then say we're not enforcing said regulation or unjust law here in our state. We're going to nullify it. And I hate that I have to do this, but people, I don't mean that the state of Missouri is telling the feds, hey, we ripped up your law and it doesn't exist. When you nullify a bad or unconstitutional or immoral law, you're only saying we're choosing not to enforce that because it goes against the Constitution. You're not marching to D.C. and pulling the bill out of a file and ripping it into pieces. Although that would be quite fun, that's not what we're doing. We're just saying that we find this bill to be immoral, or this law to be immoral or unjust, and we no longer want to enforce that law. It's really quite simple, but I think the real threat is some people are very fearful of the fact that the feds will take some of that money out of the budget, and oh my God, we'd have to watch our spending. How horrific.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the answer for everything when we decide that you, I guess, introduce some sort of actual conservative push towards getting away from the federal government is, oh, well, look, think of all the money that we're going to be losing as a state, and we can't fund that. Well, that's a risk that I'm willing to take. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like there's very many out there that are. So that just kind of goes hand in hand with how bad our Republican majority is we have here. Once again, if you would just follow the platform of the Republican Party, we'd probably be doing all right. I think that it's an absolute must that we start nullifying more federal government laws and, quite frankly, pushing back against the federal government. I mean, secession sounds pretty good right now, right? I don't know. In my opinion, you're talking about being a pessimist a while ago. I probably have to follow along your path on that because I don't have a whole lot of hope in regards to, me if elected. Of course, I'm going to try to change things, but in reality, let's just look at how many bills people like Thomas Massey get, or how many bills like Tony Lovato has gotten through. Well, it's because we consider them the best legislators in the legislature, but unfortunately, when you go against the grain, you're not well liked. And unfortunately, the power structure that we have going on here in D.C. and Jefferson City, it just doesn't lead to a whole lot of success, I guess. But I like the thought of a nullification caucus. I'm going to have to look into that. I think I've talked about that for many years in regards to nullification in general of federal items. I just don't see much change happening, and I think that is something that we as a state could do. But with that said, you have to have conservative leadership, and that's probably the biggest hurdle we have right now.
Yeah, and since you brought it up, because I hadn't even thought of it, have you been keeping up with like what Texas is doing with Texit, and they're finding more people all the time to support secession, and as much as I hate to say it, this whole thing with the border, and Biden threatening them, and then of course the Supreme Court decision to say, oh yes, they can come in and cut the razor wire down. But this is a heck of an argument for people in Texas to support Texas. So A, let's what is your thoughts on this whole border thing, and then B, what do you think about something like Texas? I have seen maps, Bryant. I've seen maps. Now this could be hopeful, but it shows like Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Iowa, Kentucky, Tennessee, I think maybe Mississippi, possibly Louisiana, just basically right up the middle of the country. This one big exodus away from the federal government, and having a conglomerate of several states saying, we're done. We don't trust you. You're not here to protect our liberties, so we're going to take it into our own hands, and we're going to give this thing a shot. But with that being said, what's your thoughts on this whole border thing, and just give me your thoughts, if you're comfortable with it, on secession, like what Texas is trying to do right now?
Yeah. So real quick on the border, I will admit I haven't been paying too close attention to it. However, I do know some of the details. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very surprised that the Supreme Court ruled against Texas. I can't understand how a state can't protect their own border. It's kind of crazy to me that this is even an issue and why it even went that far. So, look, I would probably be considered soft when it comes to immigration. I want to go back, I would love to go back to the Ellis Island days, to where, if you want to come here and work, as long as you're not bringing diseases and lice and things along those lines, then, go through this one checkpoint. Of course, I'm in favor of walls. Don't get me wrong. Walls work. Build a wall, force everybody to come through one checkpoint, assuming everything is good and you're not, you're vetted and you're not disease ridden, then come on in and get to work. But with that said, the state has every right to defend its people and its border. In my opinion, of course, I'm no constitutional scholar, but I have read the U.S. Constitution on several occasions, and I can't possibly see. I don't see the argument, nor do I agree with the Supreme Court on this situation. But I'm also just a lowly citizen here in Missouri. So what can I say about that? In regards to secession, I mean, I've actually had this in my mind. Of course, it's more probably just a dream than anything of maybe filing a resolution that states if any other state agrees to secession, that Missouri will fall along in line right away. So basically, we're with them, even if it's California. And I don't mean like with them in regards to
ideology, yeah.
Ideology-wise, exactly. But I mean in regards to, hey, if another state decides to leave, we should follow along those lines because we're not going to see change, man. Do you think these politicians care about us? I mean, we see it at the Jeff City level where they don't even care about us. Do you really think that the folks that are relying on super PACs and the billionaires for their money and the fun things, do you really, like my congressman is Jason Smith, and I've had several conversations with Jason Smith, and he's a great guy. But in the grand scheme of things, do you think I have his ear? Well, of course not. No, I don't. He's there to get elected every 2 years. Same with the senators; they're elected. They're there to get elected every 6 years or whatever, and so that's their job. But unfortunately, the way that mainly the 17th Amendment really kind of put a ripple into this with the state right and stuff, but unfortunately that their only appeal is to appeal to the majority of voters, which unfortunately is very easily persuaded, as we kind of discussed earlier, into they're swooned basically, and they don't care about us average voter. They don't care about us people in general. It's just about getting elected and getting their money, so that way they can get their committee seat and seem important and have this big ego and rule over us. So the only possible way that I see things changing are drastic measures, and secession would be one of those drastic measures that I would, quite frankly, probably be in favor of.
Yeah, if you would ask me a few years ago if I thought secession was, something to be considered, I'd be like, nah. But I tell you what, right now, seeing the coalition they're building in Texas and how seriously they're taking it, and then looking at the federal government and even the state government somewhat, especially the federal government, the way they're acting, and how they're trying to, and they do a pretty good job actually of forcing states into a corner, and again, getting them addicted to federal funds so they can attach those strings and have states pass laws, like seatbelt laws, so you keep your federal highway funding and all these things. I've become a much bigger supporter. I'm not going to lie. I think that any recourse that you can come up with in order to get yourself away, Tom Woods calls it a national divorce. I like that. I like that wording. You say secession and people buttholes pucker up and they're like, oh my God. They go back to slavery for some weird reason. But a national divorce, if you will, a lot of times that just sounds better and better to me, because if we could divorce ourselves from the union and, join with other states that are like-minded and build a coalition that way, because Texas has the 13th largest economy in the world. Can you imagine teaming up with a state like Texas? I mean, let's face it, Brian, all the agricultural here, we can grow a lot of food amongst all these states, and then all the industry that Texas has, plus a lot of other states. I honestly think we could do pretty well for ourselves. And, man, possibly all the liberties you could gain just by that one big step. And it is a big step. I get that. And a lot of people are like, it'll never work. They're just going to come in and attack us. Well, at some point, we go back to the founding fathers. I'm sure a lot of people are like, are you out of your mind? You're fighting the biggest empire in the world? Are you stupid? They still did it, and they won. Who's to say? And we may be even able to do it without any bloodshed. At some point, you got to look at this and go, this seems like a reasonable response to the way that the people are being treated. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I wouldn't advocate for any kind of civil war of any sort.
Right.
But I think the only way that things change is I don't see like a constitutional convention changing things. Not with the leadership that we have and the delegates that would be chosen. If anything, it might just make things worse. And man, I'll tell you what, we're in a state to where it's crazy that we have to think about this. I've listened to Tom Woods on several instances and read his book. I can't even remember the name. His main book in regards to a politically incorrect guide to America or whatever.
Yeah, the politically incorrect guide to American history. What a great book.
Yes, great book. And so yeah, I lean in that direction of yes, it would be crazy. It would be unprecedented. But at the same time, it's the only way that I could see things changing. Now, my concern is just making sure that we have the right leadership in place, and obviously the players that we have in place right now, it's never going to happen. But there's always hope, and I think that's where we probably need to be looking, unless we just want to keep going down this train of socialism leading into communism type of big government, which continues to keep happening.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bryant, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and I've got some other stuff I got to get into, and before I run out of energy here. But do you have a website for people to go to check out your campaign?
I do. It is fairly basic, but it is wolfinformissouri.com. And, of course, I have a Facebook that's Bryant Wolfin for State Representative. And I am on X. However, I will admit I'm not super. It's more just for me to go through and look at the headlines. I don't post a whole lot, but you can always follow me on there as well. But, yeah, the website is wolfinformissouri.com.
All right. And any parting words for the listeners or anything like that? I want to get this link. I'm going to post this in the chat for right now so people can go check it out. But any parting words, anything else you'd like to say to the listeners out there before we end our conversation here?
Yeah, a few things. So I wanted to, of course, I was following along the stream here, so I wanted to just kind of tag on something I said earlier that Mr. Martz, I guess, didn't find too great was in regards to, I said, no, the Second Amendment right, he's absolutely right. Our natural right to defend ourselves is something along the lines of what I should have said, and unfortunately, sometimes I get crossed in my own words and say the wrong things. But, I am a believer in that our rights are natural. They are not derived from our government nor our Constitution. Of course, when you listen to political stuff as much as I do, sometimes I fall in the lines of saying the same stuff that our figureheads say. But, yes, natural rights, not constitutional rights, of course. So a second thing is someone put on there House Bill 1401. I don't necessarily know what that is. I know I've just quickly looked it up, and it's in regards to trespass by an illegal alien. I didn't read it yet, but I will, if they want to reach out to me on Facebook, reach out to me on X or anything along those lines, I'll do my research on that, can get them an answer on there. And then I guess to conclude or to close, the number one thing for us right now is, we're trying to raise money. So we do have a formidable opponent. As I said earlier, or before, what I was telling you about before we went live here is that, we are kind of like the grassroots candidate. I don't have any intention. I have a very few select PACs that I would accept money from if I even have the opportunity to get that. And unfortunately, that puts me at a disadvantage when it comes to raising money. So, we're doing our own fundraisers here and there, but at the same time, any additional funding or spreading of word that we could get from anybody who likes our message or feels compelled to help, we would be greatly appreciative of that. The downside about politics is, money talks, and we're doing the best that we can with what we got. I think we're on a pretty good trajectory. I think we're an extremely viable candidate here. But the matter of the fact is, I'm an anti-establishment guy that's running against the establishment. So they're certainly not going to be backing me. I can promise you that. So our opponent has quite a bit of money in his war chest, and he's not going to outwork me, but I think he certainly can outspend me, and that makes me a little bit nervous. So any help that we could get in that fashion, that would be great. The thing is I'm a defender of individual liberty. I'm a champion of liberty. I want to shrink the role of government, protect our babies, protect the unborn, cut taxes and wasteful spending. Those are my things. I've been listening to you ever since a little bit before our first interview, and I love what you have to say. I love your listeners. I love what they have to say. I truly see that they're passionate about liberty and passionate about their values and their beliefs. And I certainly think that even though none of these probably live in my district, I would be a pretty darn good representative to represent their values in Jeff City. So hopefully you guys feel that way too. And, I'd love to come back anytime that you need me. So if you just like this time, you give me a text, hey, Bryant, you available? Sign me up, man. I'll be there. I just appreciate you giving me the platform to be able to speak. I love to talk about this, and it's just a passion of mine. And so the fire will never stop burning. I can promise you that. But with that said, man, I appreciate any support possible. I appreciate you for giving me the opportunity, and I hope everybody likes what I had to say.
Yeah, and I'll extend this invitation. I know I've got one other gentleman. I've got to get Jacob Turner on before the primary, but right before the primary, if you'd like to join me again, I've still got some Fridays open. Let me know. Even if it's for just 20 minutes, so you can get your message out. However long a time you've got to chat is fine with me. But yeah, if you want to come back on around primary season time or right before the primary, talk again. I'd welcome you back on and love to talk to you again, man.
I would appreciate that for sure. So thanks again. Thanks to your listeners, and I guess we'll talk to you soon. And hey, like I said in our messages, if you end up going to Jeff City for whatever reason, send me a shout. If I'm available, I'll make it down or make it over.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, one of these days I'm waiting for Lovasco to file his civil asset forfeiture bill. I guess he's trying to tidy up the language before he files it. And he said if not, he's going to file last year's bill and then amend it with the new wording once it gets in. If I decide to go up there and work that bill one day, if you can make it up there and we can walk the House side together and work that bill some, that'd be awesome. That way I can meet you face to face too and have a face to face conversation with you. I'd really enjoy that.
All right. Yeah. Sounds like a plan, John. I appreciate it, brother.
Yep. Have a great weekend, man. Best of luck in your campaign, and hope to talk to you soon, man.
Thank you, sir, and thanks to your listeners. Have a good night.
You too. All right, everybody. That was Bryant Wolfin. Again, he is running for District 145 in the Missouri House of Representatives. All right, folks. A couple other things I want to get off my chest here. Now, everybody, again, this is not Missouri politics related. Like I said, sometimes I don't always discuss Missouri politics. I like to take a little break. But a lot of people are talking about this, and thank you guys for the kind words. Yeah, I like Bryant. I like what he has to say. This whole Tucker Carlson, Vladimir Putin interview. It's funny. I did a TikTok video earlier today on it, just to express my disgust, like I don't already, about corporate media. And as some other people put it, they're poisoning the well. Before you even hear it, the talking heads in corporate media are poisoning the well. And it's like, okay, the guy interviewed Putin. And we act like some of these people act like he's committing a war crime. Now, I like some of the things that Tucker Carlson has done. I don't agree with everything he says. I don't agree with almost, what everybody says, with anyone. Everyone, there are people that we can just agree on everything. You're always going to have disagreements. But I find it hilarious and hypocritical that the corporate media is out there and, you got the EU, don't let him back into the U.S. He talked to a person. Oh, my God. The horror. He had the audacity to talk to Putin. Okay? And the crime there is, why? Because our government and our media says that he is evil incarnate? He's Hitler 2.0? No one should talk to him? I find it funny. Okay, I find it really funny. What the heck is this? Wilderness Gal says, "Hey John, did you hear that story about the dude who supposedly cut his dad's head off, calling him a traitor who worked for the feds?" No, I did not hear about that story. I'm going to have to look that up. That's creepy. It sounds horrific, but I'm going to have to look it up. But now, again, Putin is going to add in some propaganda of his own because he is the Russian president. If you talk to our leaders, they're going to insert American propaganda in. But you learn some reasoning on why this occurred. Why I don't agree with Russia invading Ukraine. I can't believe that I have to state that before I go on. But I don't agree with it at all. I think it's a bad move. But to sit here and act like he has no reason to be upset. In 1991-ish, they were waving a white flag like we surrender, and the U.S. is like, all right, dude, we're gonna be cool. We're not gonna be stupid here with you. And what they do? They just keep adding countries to NATO all the way around his border. They want to do it with Ukraine. At some point, he's like, guys, please stop. They were talking for years. Please stop. It would be the same thing if the United States, we were here and we were minding our own business, which we can't seem to do. But let's just say hypothetically, we weren't interfering in the affairs of a lot of other nations. And then China plants weapons along our borders. We're going to be pretty upset about that. In fact, if it happened today, even with the amount of shenanigans that come out of this federal government and their foreign policy, we'd be apoplectic. They'd be freaking out. But NATO's supposed to be able to do this to Russia, and Russia's just supposed to sit on their hands and go, I'm sure it's for a good reason. No country wants a bunch of other countries surrounding their borders with weapons of war. Now, again, I don't agree with the invasion of Ukraine, but I understand why he's upset. You have to be you have to be completely blind and void of thought to sit here. But this is the problem with America. A lot of people in America, they look at the rest of the world, like they're all insane. And whatever we do is completely right. And if they did the same thing, it's immoral. They're just horrible people. They're dictators. They're communists. Everything else. Thanks, Doug. I got the link. Appreciate it. But if we do it, it's fine. But if they do it, it's bad. You know why they think that way? Because the media programs them. That's why they call it a TV program. They're programmed to think in that way. They're not thinking for themselves. That's the problem. They're not thinking for themselves. And to just come out and call Tucker Carlson a traitor is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's insane. It's naive. It's dumb. It's a lot of things. But I don't believe that because Tucker Carlson went and interviewed Putin, that suddenly he's a traitor to the United States. he basically put up a middle finger to the establishment and said, I'm going to do it anyway. And you know what? I may not agree with all the questions, or I may not agree with everything, but good for him. Having the intestinal fortitude to do that, he knew exactly what was going to be thrown at him, and he did it anyway. And you can't say that for a whole lot of other media outlets or so-called journalists in this country that feed you filtered news, slanted news, biased news. Now, everybody puts their own personal bias in when they report. At least most of them do. You find it's very seldom you don't hear somebody put their own bias in. That's just a human thing. A lot of people insert a little their own. I do it. I'm biased towards liberty and freedom and people getting to keep more of their money. So and I'm not a journalist. Everybody knows that. But I inject my bias into this show. So everybody's going to do it. But there's a difference between a little bit of bias and then spoon-feeding stuff that the government, the media, spoon-feeding their viewers stuff that the government finds appropriate, or that people in these bureaucracies find appropriate, that is safest for them, it helps them keep their cover, doesn't blow their cover, right? That's what our media does for the most part now. Not everybody, but the majority do that. So this guy goes outside the lines. God forbid a journalist do journalistic things and say, you know what, I'm going to talk to this guy anyway. I'm going to ask him questions. And I'm not going to ask him about a bunch of softball questions. I'm just going to ask him questions. Because some people use that big glop of cholesterol up inside their skull called a brain, and they want to know things. They're curious. They don't believe everything that's being told to them. God forbid people think outside the box. God forbid people hear the other side of the story. Whether there's some mistruths or some lies spread in there, I bet you dollars to donuts that there was a lot of truth in there too. And that's the problem. Our government, the Biden administration, the media, because they've been playing, CYA, cover your anus, for the government for so long, they can't have somebody out there injecting a bunch of truth in. But the amount of views that interview is going to get could be a little damaging, because the clamor for the continued monetary support of Ukraine is dwindling. Now, the government keeps wanting to print the money for Ukraine along with Israel and then send a pittance to for border stuff. But here's the thing. Will we ever know the truth of why our government is funding Ukraine? There are some other things here that I don't know if we'll ever know why exactly the government is funding these things. Because I think there's a lot of things unknown. I think there's a lot of things that we don't know the reason. I don't know if it's Zelensky's blackmailing everyone. I don't know. But there are other things involved here that may take us 10 years to find out exactly why. Well, if the world is still here, if they haven't blown it up because we can't, again, stop spreading war across the globe and screwing around in things that we shouldn't be. But in about 10 years, maybe we'll know the actual reasons, or some of them. Someone's going to find out exactly why we continue to fund this when clearly it's a losing battle. Not to mention the fact that we're paying government salaries for all these bureaucrats in Ukraine. It's not just the war. We're propping up their government and paying their salaries. I don't know. I think it'd be a good thing to question why we are doing this. What is the actual reason why we're doing this? Yeah, I just had to get that off my chest because good God Almighty. I was listening to another podcast this morning. They were just playing clips from all the talking heads in media and all the awful things they were saying about Tucker Carlson in this interview. I found it, well, it was annoying. It kind of made me angry, but at the same time, I also found it humorous. Just the arrogance alone of the people in media and government in this country is astounding. The hubris. It's like, God, do you guys ever think? This literally, do you ever actually think? Or is all your, or think about the rest of the world or the people in your country? Or are you simply looking out for your own financial gains? I think it's a pertinent question. I think it's an important question. What are they so afraid of? Why are they so hell-bent on continuing to fund a government that's corrupt, that eliminated all the other parties, and have done a lot of other things? And Germany blows up the Nord Stream pipeline. They blame it on Putin. So many things here to sift through. So much information to sift through. But at the end of the day, if you've got more than 2 brain cells to rub together, you got to know that what's going on is just not right. And it should cease immediately. We should not be continuing this almost like, I think George Carlin kind of said it was like, this locker room behavior, this jock macho stuff. Like they're just whipping them out and having a measuring them, having a peeing match. It's just jock mentality. Like we're all in the locker room. We're like, oh, I'm the baddest man in here. I can bench more than you. It just seems like some macho jock BS. Not a way to keep your people safe. Anyway, I'll stop there because then you have Scott Fawn, who had Roy Blunt on with him, and he's going to be throwing a little shindig and naming Cindy O Laughingstock, as I affectionately call her. So, would I get in trouble? Here's a question, folks. Would I get in trouble if I went to some place that made trophies and it was the top part of it where you would normally have a person, if like it's sports trophy, it's like if it's a baseball team or it has the, respective gear for whatever sport, basketball, hockey, football, baseball, whatever. But I wonder if I could have a trophy made where it's a pair of overalls but with the back of it cut out, and there's a big pair of butt cheeks sticking out, right? And then I would find the rhinos in the state capitol that Scott Fawn just pours out his love for, but I would call it the Hillbilly Thunderbutt Award. And I would send it to the biggest rhino. So I would be doing the opposite of what Tom Martz and the Lock and Smith Foundation with the granite plaque. I would give out the Hillbilly Thunderbutt Award. Now, it wouldn't be from Scott Fawn, but they would probably put it in a display case, put it in a frame. Best rhino in the Senate. Best rhino of the House. We could do male and female. I know I'm assuming genders, and that's not what I'm supposed to do. But I just wonder if I could do the Hillbilly Thunderbutt Award and present it to the biggest rhino in both cabinets, or, both sides of the Capitol. Would I get in trouble? And it would just say, the Hillbilly Thunderbutt Award for Best Rhino in the House. And I could put their name on it. and I could just mail it to them. I wonder if I'd get in trouble. Because, I highly doubt Scott Fawn knows that my nickname for him is Hillbilly Thunderbutt. But it was literally, this idea just has just sprung to mind. So maybe we can fund that. Maybe we can do a fundraiser for the Hillbilly Thunderbutt Awards, and we'll just do the opposite of what the Locke and Smith Foundation does. It's a comical thing we can do. Oh, Tom Marsh says, I can give you those point scores as well. Hey, that'd be great. I just, Scott Fawn claiming that Cindy O'Loughlin is Stateswoman of the Year proves to me that Scott Fawn is not some hillbilly conservative. Now, I also admit that on X, I call him Speakeasy Scott because of what we heard at a meet and greet. But I also affectionately call him Hillbilly Thunderbutt. So, I guess you could call him Speakeasy Scott Hillbilly Thunderbutt if we were going to give him his full name. But anyway, that was appalling. The woman who acted like a petty child and was making threats to expel, well, half jokingly, expel Bill Eigel from the Senate. Oh, man. Wilderness Gal says, please do, John Williams. I'll be your hillbilly farm boot wearing Vanna White. Yes. All right. I'm probably going to have this all jacked up, so I'm going to have to, yep, I got it jacked up. Hold on. Let me fix this real quick. Oh, that's because I got it on the wrong page, you nincompoop. So in this week's edition of the Gasconade County Republican, Superintendent explains R2 no tax increase bond issue question scheduled for ballot. I just want to highlight the beginning of this article. A slew of misinformation regarding the 2024 no tax increase bond issue prompted a question and answer series with Gasconade County R2 Superintendent Dr. Jerry K. Hardy. Although data was previously printed in the paper during the failed 2023 NTI bond request, the renewed bond initiative has prompted a request for updated information. Well, no kidding. The first one, has enrollment at the Gasconade County R2 school district decreased this school year? It says our enrollment is up at 1,840 students as of September 2023. It says which it was 15. Wait a minute. The enrollment numbers previously discussed refer to our daily attendance, which is 1,577. So they go through and, here's one thing. John Grady's not in the live stream. But it says, okay. What would you say to allegations from John Grady, a reporter for the Herman Advertiser Courier, who claims the information on the NTI bond and financials are unavailable to the public? If the community has a question, call and ask. If they are looking at financials, our books are open. Our line items and financial information are public records. You don't have to sunshine law that. It is on our board docs, and all information is available online. I have never had a phone call from Mr. Grady requesting information. He somehow provides insights by me, according to an article in the Advertiser Courier, but never talked to me. Now, I want to show you one other thing here, folks. This is a new thing that they've put out. And okay, so as you can see, here's, this is all the new addition here. Career tech, choir, band rooms, drama room, office concessions, restroom, lobby, gallery, auditorium, and storm shelter. Now, again, they've changed the wording. There is no more performing arts center. They've changed the wording. But here's why do we need this? It says at the bottom. Add and update all building cameras. Build storm-safe auditorium for school and community use. What if the school's closed? What if it's after hours? Add a school resource officer hub to organize and plan in case of emergency. Connect main building to ag building and OHS, ensuring doors can be locked at all times. I'm going to say this for the umpteenth thousandth time. Okay? That is, build a freaking hallway from here to the ag building if you're worried about security, and I don't think anybody would complain. Here's where I get really bothered. Give our kids a competitive edge. Update turf and lighting at the stadium. Replace bleachers in OHS main gym. Renovate main gym at OMS so it is a usable facility. Relocate weight room to larger updated space by locker rooms. And then career-centered learning spaces. Expand OHS to add additional classrooms. Update facilities at the Gerald Elementary School. Now, the last time they did this, see, here's the thing. There's no guarantee that by the time they get this done, if it was to be passed, that they would get all that done with all that money. That's one of the main concerns that I have, right? But this, give our kids a competitive edge. I'm sorry. Again, I have no problem with student athletics. But now here's the thing. When they put turf on the field, that was done without bond money. They had money set aside, and they spent that money on taking it from a grass field to artificial turf. But now we got to update the turf and lighting because I guess that's the only way our football team's not going to suck or something. Are you telling me that the lighting? Now, I'm not an athlete. I'm sure maybe lighting it plays a part. But here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. I mean, it just sounds like we have to keep up with the other schools. We have to keep up with the other schools. We have to have fancy turf and fancy lighting like they do. And that's where I'm just going to agree to disagree with you. This is not a competition. I mean, yes, athletic sports are a competition, right? They're always a competition. But good God Almighty. It's just ignorant, just flat out ignorance. I don't know how else to put it. Flat out ignorance. And it's went up. It was $15.5 million last year. Now it's $16.5. The cost has risen $1 million in a year. And again, do they know for sure that they can get everything done with that money? Or are we going to turn around and 3 to 4 years ago, oh, we didn't get it done the first time. We need more money. That OMS gym has been, that floor has been bad for years. Suddenly, it's a problem. You can't tell me there's not enough spare money to go in there and repair that floor without putting it on a school bond issue and continuing the tax levy for what, 15, 20 years? Give me a freaking break. Again, to the folks out there who might hear this and say, well, you don't care about the kids. Well, number one, nothing could be further from the truth. Number two, if you support this wholeheartedly, then you don't care about fixed income people, the low income families. You don't care about them because the burden is on them as well. What say you to that? Probably not a whole lot, I would assume. Yeah, just to give you a little information. I don't want to go too long on it because then I'm going to go off some real long-winded rant and start screaming at the sky. Next thing you know, I'll be outside tomorrow staring directly at the sun till I burn my corneas out. flipping my lid outside and have the neighbors call the po-po on me because John apparently, someone flipped his psycho switch and he's making all the neighbors concerned with his behavior. Gary Wright says, chemtrails. Oh, took a drink. Took a drink of water and it went down the wrong. I tried to do it again. Almost inhaled my own saliva. John slowly drowning in the live stream. Anyway, good Lord, I might get it cleared out. If you don't hear from me next week, apparently I'm still laying in the office, drowning in my own saliva and water. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. To all of those out there who watch via YouTube or Rumble, if you listen on the radio or by podcast app, I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. I really do. You all are great. You've been very supportive. Always some kind words. So, folks, I'm going to be just a little bit honest with you here. Well, not a little bit. I'm just going to be upfront with you. I appreciate all the kind words. And if I don't respond in a way that would seem normal, it's because, this isn't a huge show. I don't have thousands of followers and I'm not making a living from this. But if I don't respond in a normal way, it's because I'm trying to keep my ego in check. I do not want to get an ego about anything. I want to be humble. I do this because I enjoy it. I enjoy the camaraderie. I enjoy the friendships that I've made by going to the Capitol and spending time with a lot of great people and meeting them in person and just having conversations. And not to pick somebody out of the group, but because I really appreciate that I've met all of you. But Gary Wright and I have especially clicked. Our senses of humor are just so identical. Like, anytime I get up to the Capitol, I walk with Gary, and the last time I got to walk with Gary and his wife, which was cool too, I just have a blast. Also, now Doug and Maya are sweethearts. Absolutely love them to death. And then, like Tom, I love talking to Tom because of his just absolute brutal honesty on anything. And I love it. Tom will give you his opinion without a filter, and I love it. But he does it in a charming and comical way at times, and I appreciate that. And Voodoo Queen, I met her once at an Eagle event. It was great to see her, and she is the email/fax queen of the Missouri Freedom Initiative. But that's just some of the people that, Goatfoot Grant, such a super cool guy. Love being able, when I get to see him at the Capitol, love talking to him. There's just so many people that I've met and been able to, build friendships with that I just appreciate the heck out of you folks. And again, anybody that listens on the radio that enjoys the show, the other people that watch on Rumble or YouTube, any of my subscribers, people that download on the podcast app, absolutely adore all of you. I don't know we're not going to agree on everything, but I appreciate that you take the time out to listen to me flap my gums for sometimes 2 hours plus at a whack. I appreciate the fact. And then, of course, I have to give, we're talking radio-wise, Bill Mundhausen at KEYK, and Sam and Trish Britton at MissouriLibertyRadio.us. I have to give big props to them because they continue to support me. In fact, I was really shocked. Bill sent out an email from KEYK, and he kind of highlighted some of the shows that he thought were good on the network, and I was fortunate enough to be one of them. I did not expect to be on that list because he has such a diverse, type of shows. There's a diversity in topics covered, and top of just topics that are covered, and I happened to be on that list, and I was like, whoa, you know, I was honored. I don't expect it. I enjoy this, and I enjoy the camaraderie that I built with so many folks, and I appreciate that you all, like Patrick's group, and Patrick and his wife Retha, and all these people who are going out and doing amazing things, and putting a lot of fight and putting a lot of effort into that fight to try to get us to be the freest state in the nation. And it's hard to say that's a bad thing. It's hard to say, well, that's a waste of time. So it's awesome stuff. But yeah, I appreciate all your kind words. I really do. It's just I'm trying to stay humble, and I don't want to become arrogant and act like I'm some big shot, I don't want to be the Scott Fawn here on YouTube. But yeah, that's I had to put that in at the end. You know what? I think we're going to end the show with the music that I started at the beginning, to kick off the live stream. I want to play this song called "Seesaw Your Fire," and I guess this just goes out to, talking about the Ukraine, all the proxy wars, this Israel-Palestine thing, or Israel-Gaza, the Gaza Strip, however you want to state that. You got the proxy war with Yemen, all this stuff in the Middle East. I just kick off the show with "Seesaw Your Fire." Maybe a good way to end the show. And then, that's the way we'll not kick things off. That's the way we'll kick off the ending. How's that? So let me pull this up real quick, and we shall jam out to some Trivium, "Seesaw Your Fire," right here at the end. All right, folks. Yeah, Bryant's still hanging out in the live chat. Thanks, Bryant. Wilderness Gal, John Doe, Tom March, Gary Ride, Voodoo Queen. I saw Casey Rich was in here a little bit. Patrick was in here for a little bit. Again, you guys always keep the live chat lively. Maybe start calling it lively chat. I still want to do the Hillbilly Thunderbutt Award, but that's just me. I guess that's a childish part of my brain that thinks that would be freaking hilarious. But anyway, to all you guys and gals in the live stream, appreciate each and every one of you, as always, because you guys are amazing people. And maybe we will get the pleasure of having Bryant Wolfin in the Missouri House of Representatives and have another ally in the fight to bring a little more liberty back to the state of Missouri. That would be ever so nice. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Be safe. I'm going to go hang out with my buddy tomorrow that had an unfortunate motorcycle accident here last year. And going to hang out with him for a little while tomorrow afternoon and in the evening time. And, yeah, I think it should be a good time because when me and my buddy Chris get together, we laugh like a couple of juveniles for hours at a time, discussing, well, anything and everything. And I thoroughly enjoy his company. So anyway, that's pretty much the only thing I got planned for the weekend. And but anyway, you guys have a great weekend. I don't have a guest scheduled at this time for next week's show, but you never know what will happen between now and then. Bryant was sometime after the show last week. I was like, you know what? Bryant's, I know he's been wanting to come on the show, and I like having him on there. And, you know, why not? Have him back on to discuss his campaign and the topics that are important to Missouri. Anyway, oh, yes, Gary Wright. Good answer. I will call Travis Smith and see if I can't get him on. That dude is a hoot. When we're at the Capitol and we run into Travis, you will have a very lively conversation. Good old Travis Smith. Thank you, Gary. I will do that. I will get in touch with him, and maybe I can get him scheduled for next Friday. All right, folks, with that being said, again, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate you as always. Stay safe. Let's keep fighting the good fight. We'll see you all next Friday right here on the Missouri Liberty Report.